For decades, Western think tanks and political leaders have warned that Russia harbors ambitions of invading and seizing the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. That looming threat was the primary reason the three nations rushed to join NATO in March 2004. Now, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, those fears have only sharpened. The Baltic countries' firm support for Ukraine has further positioned them as potential targets, heightening the sense of urgency. In response, the Baltics and their NATO allies have ramped up preparations to deter or disrupt any possible invasion. But Lithuania recently took things a step further, unveiling plans for what is arguably the most concrete and comprehensive defensive system yet, a 30-mile deep defensive belt along its entire border with Russia and Belarus. To understand why this plan matters, we need to look at the geography. With the exception of Finland, the Baltic states are the only NATO members sharing a direct land border with Russia. Estonia's border is roughly 200 miles long, though a large portion is marked by lakes rather than land. Latvia's borders stretch about 183 miles with Russia and another 106 with Belarus. Lithuania's situation is even more precarious, 422 miles with Belarus and roughly 170 miles with the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad. The Lithuanian capital, Vilnius, sits just 21 miles from Belarus, barely a short drive down the E28 highway. In the event of an invasion, Vilnius could easily become the first prize. Defense Minister Dovydas Sakalieni's August 2025 announcement seeks to prevent that. The plan calls for a 30-mile deep belt of layered defenses that would stand between Vilnius and any advancing force. Some critics quickly compared this project to the infamous Maginot Line, but that comparison isn't quite accurate. The Maginot Line was a vast network of fortifications France built along its German border between 1929 and 1938, made of reinforced concrete and steel. It featured underground barracks, storehouses, even railways to resupply garrisons. French planners hoped the line would buy time for mobilization, creating a defense in depth with forward posts to delay attackers before retreating into the main fortifications. But in 1940, the Germans simply bypassed it by pushing through the Ardennes in Belgium, a route French strategists had wrongly dismissed as impassable. The result was disaster, the fall of France. Lithuania's planners clearly don't want to repeat that mistake. Their defensive line will cover the entire eastern and southern border, from the Latvian frontier in the northeast all the way to the Polish border in the south, and across the Kaliningrad boundary. The only portion left open is the Suwalki Gap, Lithuania's 65-mile border with Poland, NATO's key land bridge to the Baltics. But with NATO already heavily fortifying that area, the Lithuanians won't leave. The same exploitable gap that doomed the Maginot Line. Recent history also supports the approach. The war in Ukraine has shown that multi-layered defensive belts are extremely effective in modern warfare. Ukrainian forces have repeatedly slowed or stopped Russian advances by using dense defensive lines. These strategies in turn were heavily influenced by Russia's own formidable defensive belts, most notably the so-called Surovikin Line built in southeastern Ukraine in 2023, named after General Sergei Surovikin. The Surovikin Line ran for over 80 miles, consisting of minefields, anti-vehicle ditches, dragon's teeth, and trench systems, positioned on elevated ground wherever possible. These fortifications gave Russian defenders an enormous advantage. When Ukraine launched its ambitious counteroffensive in 2023, hoping to retake Zaporizhzhia and even push toward Crimea, it ran headfirst into the line. Despite deploying NATO-supplied Abrams tanks, Bradleys, and other advanced weapons, Ukrainian forces could barely scratch the defenses. The counteroffensive stalled, costing them heavy losses in manpower and equipment. The Surovikin Line had succeeded where the Maginot Line had failed. In the aftermath, Ukraine adapted its strategy, building its own extensive trench networks and layered fortifications across hundreds of miles of front line, around key towns like Lyman, Avdiivka, and Pokrovsk. Ukraine established multiple fallback positions, dug in command centers, and dense belts of mines and obstacles. These defenses proved nearly impossible for Russia to crack quickly, even when backed by massive artillery barrages. The principle was clear. Layered defenses, properly designed, can grind an attacker down to a crawl. Lithuania has absorbed these lessons. Its planned defensive belt mirrors the depth and density of Ukraine's fortifications, but on a national scale. And it's not just Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and Poland are also investing in similar measures. In January 2024, the Baltic states agreed to construct the Baltic Defense Line, a joint system of bunkers and obstacles, covering over 1,000 miles of their borders with Russia and Belarus. Estonia pledged to build 600 bunkers for $65 million, designed with T-shaped dugouts, protective earthworks, and supporting infrastructure. Latvia began deploying Dragon's Teeth, Lego block concrete obstacles, and metal hedges in its Latgale region. Meanwhile, Poland unveiled its Shield East initiative, a $2.5 billion plan to reinforce its 430-mile border with Belarus and Kaliningrad with fortifications, surveillance systems, and barriers due for completion by 2028. Lithuania's own preparations began in 2024 with the establishment of 27 engineering equipment parks. These stockpiles house razor wire, concrete roadblocks, Dragon's Teeth, and hedgehog anti-tank barriers. The plan is to rapidly deploy these tools to construct a dense, three-layered defensive belt 30 miles deep. The first echelon, about 3 miles from the border, will start with an anti-tank ditch alongside border fencing, followed by embankments, Dragon's Teeth, minefields, and infantry strongpoints. Lithuania has even withdrawn from the Ottawa Convention banning anti-personnel mines, signaling it intends to use them. The country has already purchased tens of thousands of anti-tank mines, worth over $70 million. The second echelon, around 12 miles in, will feature further infantry positions and prepared demolitions for bridges, ensuring retreating defenders can deny advancing forces key crossings. The third echelon, 30 miles from the border, will provide fallback lines and choke points. Trees along major roads will be cut in, advanced to create easier kill zones for destroying enemy armor. All of this will be backed by artillery, tanks, and anti-tank missiles. Lithuania has ordered 44 Leopard 2A8 battle tanks from Germany, acquired $7 million worth of Israeli Spike LR2 missiles, and replenished its stock of 155-meter shells. The country already spends over 5% of its GDP on defense, more than almost any other NATO member. But the greatest challenge is manpower. Lithuania fields about 23,000 active soldiers and 104,000 reservists. Estonia and Latvia have even fewer. Across the border, Belarus maintains around 65,000 active troops and 350,000 in reserve, backed by Russian deployments ranging from 2,000 to 10,000. Kaliningrad once housed 25,000 Russian troops, but war redeployments may have reduced that to just 6,000. Still, Russia reportedly keeps tactical nuclear weapons in both Belarus and Kaliningrad, and in August 2025, Moscow announced it had stationed Oreshnik hypersonic missiles in Belarus. Without NATO reinforcements, the Baltics simply cannot match Russia and Belarus in raw manpower or firepower. That's exactly why the Baltic Defense Line makes sense. It's not meant to win the war alone, but to slow an invasion long enough for NATO to respond. War games suggest the outcome of any invasion hinges on how fast NATO can reinforce. Russian anti-access systems in Kaliningrad and Belarus would need to be neutralized, and NATO forces would have to secure the Suwalki Gap to ensure safe passage. That takes time that Lithuania's defensive belts aim to provide. And these defenses aren't just static walls. They're designed to channel Russian forces into disadvantageous terrain, where NATO defenders can encircle and destroy them. This concept, known as elastic defense, has roots in Soviet strategy at the Battle of Kursk in 1943 and has been echoed in Russia's more recent offensives. Essentially, defenders allow attackers to break through, but only in carefully chosen areas that become traps. Lithuania's terrain, with its forests, wetlands, and rivers, is naturally suited for this kind of layered defense. To make these plans viable, Lithuania needs more boots on the ground. That's why Germany's commitment to permanently station a full brigade, about 5,000 troops of the 45th Armored Brigade by 2027, is so significant. The US and Germany already keep smaller contingents in Lithuania, but this larger permanent presence will dramatically strengthen deterrence. Lithuania is also boosting its own readiness. In August 2025, it conducted Fierce Wolf 2025, a 2-week exercise along the Belarusian border. The drills involve 350 troops, 50 pieces of equipment, and live-fire operations in urban environments with Vilkas infantry fighting vehicles. These exercises not only test Lithuania's capabilities but also demonstrate its resolve. Meanwhile, construction of the defense line is underway. The Ministry of Defense projects a 10-year timeline with 2 phases. By 2028, focus on building out the physical barriers. After 2029, shift to long-term maintenance and modernization. Conveniently or ominously, several NATO leaders have suggested 2029 or 2030 as the most likely timeframe for a potential Russian invasion. If that prediction proves accurate, Lithuania's defensive system will be fully operational just in time. The hope is clear. If Russia ever attempts an invasion of the Baltic states, its offensive will bog down against these layered defenses, just as Ukraine's counteroffensive did against the Surovikin line. That delay could prove decisive, giving NATO the time it needs to mobilize reinforcements and ensuring that the Baltic states remain free. We'll continue following this story closely. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the latest updates.